we have to face is the mark of the beast. But what is the real issue as concerning the mark of the beast? It have to do with a false gospel. And it also have to do with a false prophet that uses shamanic miracles to deceive the people to accept and follow the mark of the beast. Look at Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20. You will see it have to do, while it have to do with a false gospel, it had to have people preaching that gospel. So it will be the false prophet. But the false prophet will be effectual in convincing people that his false gospel is true, because it will be sustained by shamanic miracles to deceive the people to accept and follow the mark of the beast. Yes, look at Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20. What does it say? It says here, and the beast was taken. So this is time for retribution. The time when God will be giving retribution unto this system. It says, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him. Do you see that, my dear people? With which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worship his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. So you see where they will end up? Both the beast and the false prophet. So this whole issue about the mark of the beast, it has to do with the false prophet preaching a false gospel. And this false prophet will be using shamanic miracles to deceive the people to accept and follow the mark of the beast. You see that? Look at Revelation 13 to 15 again. Revelation 13 to 15 again, my dear brethren. Don't be weary in well-doing. Don't be weary in going over these scriptures over and over. Look at verse 13. It says, and he doeth great wonder. That is miracles, that miraculous wonder. And he doeth great wonder, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth. You see that? So here these miracles is intended to deceive men. So here the false prophet, he's preaching a false gospel, so errors for so in people's mind. False concept in people's mind instead of the truth. And as a result of false concept, error being in people's mind, there's deceived in their mind with those false doctrine. So now they are really prepared psychologically to be further deceived by miracles. By miracles, my dear brethren. Yes. And he deceived them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles, which he had power to do. You see that? That power there is legislative power, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound of the sword and did live. So the further influence that will be coming from the false prophet and from the image of the beast being set up due to these miracles is where they will not keep it to America alone, but they're going to propagate that it should be like this all over the world. Saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which did have the wound by a sword and did live. So this will be speaking to the world population, the various governments of the earth, all of them will be beckoned to look, make an image, set up the image of the beast. Just like what we have in America, you do the same. You see that? Just like what we set up here, the image of the beast in America, you do the same in your country if you want to have trading, rights with us. That is why nobody will be able to buy or sell except they follow this decree. You see that? That's right, my dear brethren. You see? So the false prophet is explained as doing miracles in Jesus' name. Notice, the false prophet is explained as doing miracles in Jesus' name, saying, Lord, Lord, but not doing his will. That is what we are told in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 15. Matthew 7 and verse 15, this is what it says here. It says, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep clothing, but inwardly are ravening wolves. Do you see that? Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Look at 21 to 23. It says, not everyone that said unto me, Lord, Lord. So this false prophet will be saying, Lord, Lord, they're using the name of Christ. But he's telling us here, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. You see that? And verse 23, and then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. You see that? So Christ will say, depart from me. I had given a study some time ago showing that the saddest words or statement that could ever be pronounced in the whole universe is right here in verse 23. When Christ would say, depart from me, I never knew you. Those would be the saddest words would ever be pronounced in the whole universe. When Christ says, depart from me, ye that worketh iniquity. You see that? That means the person is robbed of everlasting life, they're lost forever. But what will bring somebody to that state? It is deceptions coming from the false prophet. And these deceptions, which is a false gospel, is being impacted upon or is given a booster of miracles by evil angels. Shamanic miracles will boost up the forcefulness of the error that is being preached by the false prophet. So one you is deceived, you have false doctrine in your mind. To think that the flesh could give you true satisfaction and pleasure. So you are deceived, so you're going after the flesh. And that now, going after the flesh now, as Brother Andreas implied in his study there, going after the flesh, right, will be magnified. Those concepts in the mind that deceive someone to tell them that, satisfaction and pleasure comes through the seeking the things of the flesh. That will be magnified under Sunday law. Because here it is the exalting a day that came from the impulses of the human fleshly mind that was captivated by Satan. So to go after Sunday holiness, that is still going after the flesh in the highest form. So all these things is designed, my dear brethren, to make us become sincere. If we really want salvation, these are the things we have to consider. So here he's telling us here about they'll be saying, Lord, Lord, and doing not his will. Doing not his will. What is doing the will of God? Look at Psalms 40 and verse 8. What does it mean by doing the will of God? So here I have this false prophet religion, the evangelical movement, daughters of Babylon. They are saying, Jesus, Jesus, Lord, Lord, and they're doing not his will. But Christ saying here, to those people, he would say, depart from me, I know you not. Depart from me, I know you not. Well, let us see what it means to be doing his will. Look at Psalms 40 and verse 8. It says here, I delight to do thy will, O my God, yea, thy law is within my heart. You see that? So to the person who is not deceived, to the person who is converted in heart, that person will have a willingness to do God's will. They'll be willing to do the will of God. You see that? I delight to do thy will, oh my God, yea, thy law is within my heart. So the person will be delighted in doing the works of the law by faith, which they were converted by. So the person is converted through the faith of Jesus Christ, and now they're using that faith with delightfulness, delightsomeness to do the works of the law. So they wouldn't be putting feelings over. They wouldn't be allowing feelings to captivate their will. You see that? As I said, I came home whole day out there and then drive all the way down and then make a whole big wrongs. Plenty driving. Sister Helen was with me, you know, and I doing it with delightfulness. And I said to myself, no infirmities coming in your midst today to cause you to say, go and rest, when the brethren there have to get the bread of life. It is time now for us to live our name, thusia, self-sacrificing or self-nonness love. You see that? So here, I delight to do thy will. Oh my God, yea, thy law is within my heart. And this is the problem with false religion. Because they is not doing the law of God by disregarding the 7-day Sabbath. And this will be made law. So thus they claim to follow Jesus Christ. They are claiming to follow Jesus Christ. But their religion is devoid of real obedience to God's law. Because they break one clause of the law, therefore are guilty of transgressing all. That is what we are reminded of in James chapter 2, 8 to 12. Let us see that when you break one of the commandments, you are guilty of all. So in James chapter 2, right, 8 to 12, it says, if you fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, so notice the royal law, which is the kingly law, is to be fulfilled, but you have to follow it according to the scriptures. What does that mean? Well, the scriptures shows that you have to fulfill it through faith. You see that? It tells us that the Gentiles, which know not the law and so on, they seek after the faith. They did it by faith. And they are attained unto righteousness because of faith. So it says here, if you fulfill the royal law according to the scriptures, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, you do well. But if you have respect to persons, you commit sin and are convinced of the law's transgressors. So, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. You see that? So speak ye, and so do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty. So here, this verse here, so speak ye and so do, put a stop to hypocrisy. So speak ye, so do. Because the form of godliness is where the person is speaking, but they are not doing. They're speaking, but they are not doing. They can explain things far as where the outward learning is concerned, but they're not doing it. They're denying it in works. So here the apostle is telling us here James is telling us, so speak ye and so do, as they that shall be judged, because we have a judgment to face. So you see, they claim to follow Jesus Christ, but their religion is devoid of real obedience to God's law. Because they break one clause of the law, therefore they are guilty of transgressing all. And what is the one clause that they are breaking continually? 7-day Sabbath keeping. Because here you have a whole religious establishment the world over, the evangelical movement called the Daughters of Babylon. They does not acknowledge the 7-day Sabbath. You see that? Babylon was riddled with sun worship at a point in time. The veneration of this unconquered sun. Therefore, Sunday. And that is what these religions go off on while they say Jesus, Jesus. That one clause, the clause of 7-day Sabbath keeping, that is broken by these false prophet religions that claim to follow Jesus, is the 7-day Sabbath. We know this because the message is given to warn men to keep it. And this is what the third angel meant, the first and second angel message is all about. We know that that one that they are breaking is the 7-day Sabbath. You see that? We know this because the message is given by God to warn men to keep it. So when you look at Revelation chapter 14, 6 and 7, that is the contextual background for this warning here. Revelation 14, 6 and 7. It says here, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven. Now remember, angel symbolized messenger. And a messenger is a messenger because he bears a message. So this is the first angel message. What it is? I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. So this everlasting gospel must be preached to everybody upon the earth, every nation, every tongue, every people, every kindred. You see that? And what is this gospel that is to be preached to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people? What does it constitute of? It tells us here, saying with a loud voice, fear God. So it's a call to fear God. The Bible tells us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So this gospel calls you to receive the wisdom of God. You see that? So by you receiving the wisdom of God and give glory unto him. So you can only give glory to God by you possessing the wisdom of God that is given unto you. And that is what it means to fear him. You see that? And give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. You see that? So this message will be going on at a time when the investigative judgment is going on. And we know the investigative judgment begins on the 22nd of October, 1844. So all now this gospel that is calling men to fear God, to have the wisdom of God, to glorify God, is being done in context to a judgment that is taking place. And then the call to worship him, a call to Sabbath keeping, is part of that warning. It says here, and worship him. You see that? No, it says, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. That phrase is taken from the 7-day Sabbath commandment in the Decalogue. You see that? Worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. You see that? That's right. So here we have that warning is being given to the inhabitants of the earth, a call to come and glorify God. How you glorify God? By 7-day Sabbath keeping. For you to keep the 7-day Sabbath means you must be made free from sin. And for you to be made free from sin, it means you imbibe the wisdom of Christ, which is the 7 pillars of systematic theology comprising the whole plan of salvation, starting with the Godhead and finishing up with the investigative judgment. Because you see, my dear brethren, anybody who has to be made wise with the wisdom of God, you must first understand who is this God that you are calling to worship? Who is he? So therefore the Godhead will be established. You will get a knowledge as concerning God is head. Who is God? Is he a form? Is he a shape? Is he one, numerically 1, 2, or 3, or 33 million? The knowledge of the Godhead will establish the truth about who God is, that he's God alone, and that he's revealed in the spiritual law, because God is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. You see that? You must worship him in the spirituality of the revelation of his divine nature through the divine character that is given to us as the spiritual law. You see that, my dear brethren? That's right. That's right. Yeah. So here we see that it is 7-day Sabbath keeping that the people of the earth is guilty of breaking. So then they are guilty of all. So they become what you call antinomians. So the first and second angel is a call for people to become pronomians, keepers of the law of God. Thus, the form of godliness without the power is a type of Christianity that dismiss keeping God's law as expressed in the keeping of the 7-day Sabbath. So this is what we are dealing with, this form of godliness. This form of godliness, this new and exalted, this new and more exalted religious faith. Right? Hold on. Yes. So this new and more exalted system of religious faith is really about a form of godliness without the power. It is a type of Christianity that dismisses keeping God's law as expressed in the keeping of the 7-day Sabbath. You see that? Because the Bible tells us that sin is the transgression of the law. But 7-day Sabbath keeping would mean that for that 24 hours you are without sin. Thus the Sabbath was kept holy. So the 7-day Sabbath keeping is the answer. But here you have a type of Christianity that dismisses keeping God's law as expressed in Sabbath keeping of the 7-day Sabbath. So the minute you break it, you're guilty of all 10. That's right. That is correct. So let me quote 2 Timothy 3 and verse 5 again. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 5. Look at it again, dear brethren. It says here, right? Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. From such turn away. You remember in Isaiah chapter 58 verse 13 tells us, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure upon my holy day, and so on and so on. So for you to turn away a foot from the Sabbath, you have to turn away from this form of godliness. This form of godliness, which dismisses the keeping of God's law as expressed in the 7-day Sabbath. You have to turn away from that. That's right. Look at Romans 1, 16 and 17. Romans 1, 16 and 17, and we must never get weary. These scriptures are scriptures of life. These are the things that is our lifeblood. Verse 16 says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. So here the gospel of Christ is the power of God. The word power there means, is from the Greek word dunamis, right? And it means the science, how something works. So the power of God is the science of God, the workings of God to give sin-freeness, because that is what salvation means. So it says, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth. So when the gospel is being preached, you cannot be a skeptic, doubting this and doubting that. When the gospel is being preached, it is the science of God that is being shown to you, and you now must respond to it by believing it. You see that? So salvation will be given to everyone that believe it, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek or to the Gentiles. And then we are being told, for therein, that is in the gospel, is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. As it is written, the just shall live by faith. You see that? The just shall live by faith. That's right. And look at Psalms 119 and verse 175. Psalms 119 and verse 175. This is what it says. Right. So Psalms 119 verse 175, it tells us this. Let my soul live, and I shall praise thee, and let thy judgments help me. You see that? Let my soul live. That is justification. It's on that when we are justified, created by faith, we get life and we get peace. So when he said, let my soul live, and I shall praise thee. So when we are justified, created, now we could praise God. You see, and let thy judgments help me. Thy judgments is the same law. It's a great help to us now, because we will know how to walk, what we are exempted from doing, because the light of the law will show us that. You see that? That's correct. So we want to read the statement from Mrs. Ellen G. White. Here's what the spirit of prophecy tells us about this false prophet religion. Here's what she says. She says here from the book Early Writings, page 227. I saw a very large company professing the name of Christ. Do you hear that, my dear brethren? A lot of professors. I saw a large company professing the name of Christ, but God did not recognize them as his. You see that? He had no pleasure in them. Satan seems to assume a religious character. That's what Sister Kerry was pointing out to us yesterday in her study. He seems to assume a religious character. But it's only Christ, the only intelligent entity in the whole wide universe that has character is Christ. So if Satan is assuming a religious character, it is a deception. It is a satanic insinuation that is designed to deceive people. So she says here, he had no. So let me read it over. I saw a very large company professing the name of Christ, but God did not recognize them as his. He had no pleasure in them. Satan seems to assume a religious character and was very willing that the people should think they are Christians. You see that? They were Christians. He was even anxious that they should believe in Jesus, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Satan and his angels fully believed all this themselves and tremble. You see that? So when the Bible tells us when we believe the faith, God justifies us. But here's Satan, when they believe it, they tremble. You see that? But if this faith does not provoke to good works and lead those who profess it to imitate the self-denying life of Christ, Satan is not disturbed, for they merely assume the Christian name, while their hearts are still carnal, and he can use them in his service even better than if they made no profession. Hiding their deformity under the name of Christian, they pass along with their unsanctified natures and their evil passions unsubdued. This gives occasion for the unbeliever to reproach Christ with their imperfections and causes those who though possesses pure and undefiled religion to be brought into disrepute. End of quote. Ellen G. White, Early Writings, page 227. So what could we extract from that statement by Mrs. White? What could we extract? She's telling us here about the constituents of the false prophet religion. She's telling us here they have a form of godliness without the power. And that is constituted of no real inner change have taken place. No real obedience to God's law. 7-day Sabbath is replaced with Sunday exaltation. You see that? That is what she's telling us, and this is what comprises having a form of godliness while denying the power thereof. You see that, my dear brethren? So the mark of the beast is indeed Sunday exaltation. This is clearly stated when the paper, this is clearly stated when the papacy calls Sunday exaltation its mark of authority in religious matters. Thus, the mark of the papal beast is Sunday exaltation. You see that? So we need to understand clearly that the mark of the beast is indeed Sunday exaltation. That is what it is. But Sunday exaltation by law, it will become law for everybody. Sunday is being exalted within the domain of the papal religion, but it is not yet legislated by law for everybody to follow. When that legislation comes, that will be the mark of the beast speaking about in Revelation 13 that we have to flee from. So the mark of the beast is indeed Sunday exaltation. it is clearly stated when the papacy calls Sunday exaltation its mark of authority in religious matters. Thus, the mark of the papal beast is Sunday exaltation. This is what they say from record, right? The Catholic record of London, Ontario, Canada, September the 1st, 1923. This is what they say in their writings. They say, quote, Sunday is our mark of authority. This is the papers and them saying this. You see that? Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible. And this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. End of quote. So here they themselves is telling us here that the mark of their authority is Sunday. You see that? Then they tell us again in letter from Cardinal Gibbon's office, October the 20th, 1895, by C.F. Thomas, Chancellor. Here's what we are being told, quote, it says, of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change of the Sabbath was her act. And the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. You see that? So here we are being told that the change of the Sabbath was the act of the Catholic Church. And that act of changing the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, we are being told here, it is the mark, that act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. So Sunday exaltation is the mark of the beast. Then we are being told further here by T. Enright, CSSR, Redemption College, Kansas City. Hear what we are being told here. Quote, no, keep the first day of the week and to the entire civilized world bow in reverence, obedience to the command of the Holy Catholic Church. It is the mark of our authority to overrule God's law. End of quote. You see that? So it says that the mark of their authority to overrule God's law. You see that? So here we are being told it is a Sunday law that is to be used to bring people into a form of godliness without the power thereof. This is a false conversion that the world is brought to. And here Mrs. White is telling us again in the book The Great Controversy, page 588 to 589. She says, quote, Papists, Protestants, and worldlings will alike accept the form of godliness. You see that, my dear brethren? Papists, Protestants, and worldlings will alike accept the form of godliness without the power. And they will see in this union a grand movement for the conversion of the world and the ushering in of the long-expected millennium. End of quote. You see that? Here is something for us to note, my dear brethren. Here she tells us that Papists, Protestants, and worldlings, that will include contra-humans. That will include contra-humans. I can prove it. Let me show you in John chapter 3 something here, my dear brethren. Look at John chapter 3. John chapter 3 is telling us about a ruler of the Jews, a Pharisee, who went by night to interview Jesus, to question Jesus. And you would see from the very opening of verse of chapter 3, we are given something that is very, very informative, that will fall in line with what Mrs. White is telling us here, that Papists, Protestants, and worldlings will alike accept the form of godliness. That worldlings has to do with all those unconverted contra-humans. Here we are being told in verse 1 in chapter 3 of John, it says, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. So notice, this Nicodemus was a ruler of the Jews. But Nicodemus here is an exempted one because he was justified by faith by accepting Jesus as the Messiah later on. But notice, we are being told here in verse 2, the same came to Jesus by night and said unto him, Rabbi, we know. Notice he was a Pharisee. So he said, Rabbi, we know, we the Pharisees. The we there refers to the Pharisees. We know. So what did the Pharisees know? We know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him. So far as where the Pharisees are concerned, somebody is of God when miracles is being done by them. You see that? So when these satanic miracles, these shamanic miracles begin to be performed by the false prophet, that will be in alignment with what these unconverted descendants of these Pharisees already held. That somebody is of God because of miracles. Do you see that, my dear brethren? So on the basis of that, we know that they too will be included in having this form of godliness. They will be included in that by deception of miracles. You see that? And what was Christ's answer to him? Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So far as where you Pharisees concerned, you don't come telling the Messiah about your knowledge. You know that he is a teacher sent from him because of the miracles that he do. Christ tell him, listen, except you be born again, you cannot see the kingdom. The kingdom of God, which is the kingdom of grace. You could only know that when you are born again. So Christ offers sin-freeness through the new birth as the answer for these people. Do you see what I'm showing you here, my dear brethren? So here Mrs. White is telling us here that papists, Protestants, and worldlings will alike accept the form of godliness without the power. And they will see in this union a great movement for the conversion of the world and the ushering in of the long-expected millennium. Ellen G. White, The Great Controversy, page 588 to 589. Thousands will be led to accept a form of godliness without the power thereof by the use of Sunday law, by the use of a Sunday law. Here we are being told again in the same book, The Great Controversy, page 567. Mrs. White tells us, she says, thousands who have not an experimental knowledge of Christ will be led to accept the forms of godliness without the power. Such a religion is just what the multitude desire, end of quote. You hear what she's telling us here? She said thousands will be led. She said thousands who have not an experimental knowledge of Christ. So my dear brethren, this will imply that at least we're supposed to be in the state of conquering victory, because conquering victory have to do with experimenting, taking the faith of Christ and matching it with the errors and conquering them. You see that? Taking the faith and measuring up with the satanic insinuations and conquering them until we achieve the victory. You see that? Brother Andreas prayed about we have to overcome our past sins. All these sins that we are committing in the past, remember, it was committed as a result of false concept in the minds. So those past sins must remain historical past sins, but the only how it could remain historical past sins is if you and I conquer them. When we conquer them, but to conquer them, we have to experiment, take the experimental faith of Christ, match it to the errors and destroy them. But yet still some of them is portraying an attitude whereby we prefer to be talking all kind of foolishness with people. rather than taking the faith, entering into this exercise of experimentation with the faith. Take the faith, the truth. How does that match to this? How does this portion of truth could give me victory over this? And that is what we're supposed to be doing here. And Mrs. White is telling us thousands who have not an experimental knowledge of Christ will be led to accept the form of godliness without the power. Such a religion is just what the multitudes desire. So they desire a religion that has no experiment to be done in regarding overcoming sin. You see that, my dear brethren? It is the Sunday law that is to bring global conversion, which is a form of godliness. Here again, Mrs. White tells us in Selected Messages, Book 3, page 428, she says, they declared that they had the truth, that miracles were among them. You see that? So that means those contra-human will be swept off their feet, because to them, nobody could do these miracles except God be with them. That wasn't put there by chance in John chapter 3. You see that? They declared that they had the truth, that miracles were among them, that angels from heaven talked with them and walked with them, that great power and signs and wonders were performed among them. You see that? And that this was the temporal millennium they had been expecting so long. Remember the papacy, which is the first beast. Remember her reign was for over a millennium, 1260 years. So it included a millennium. She had a millennial reign, temporal power. And here they will come to say now that, right, that miracles were among them, that angels from heaven talked with them and walked with them, that great power and signs and wonders were performed among them, and that this was the temporal millennium they had been expecting for so long. The whole earth was converted and in harmony with the Sunday law. And this little feeble people stood out in defiance of the laws of the land and the laws of God and claimed to be the only ones right on the earth. End of quote, Ellen White. Selected Messages, Book 3, page 428. So here, they will be saying, so this little people is the only one right on the earth, and it will enrage them, and they will pass the laws now, the death decree upon us. This is the new and more exalted system of religious faith that Satan propagates through a Sunday law. You see that? So get familiar with the term. New and more exalted system of faith. You know what I do, brethren? For the word new, you put on your paper N. You put on N. For the word and, you put on A next to the N. So you have N-A. And for the word more, you put on M. So you have N-A-M. And you have E for exalted. So you have N-A-M-E. That spells name. And then you put S for system, S-O-R-F. So what do you have? You have names of. Names of. An acronym now. Making it easy for you to remember. Names of. What is names of? New and more exalted system of religious faith that Satan propagates through a Sunday law. So it is Satan's propagation. This is what he's propagating through a Sunday law. A new and more exalted system of religious faith. Yes, my dear brethren. You see that? Here, Mrs. White tells us again in the book, The Great Controversy, page 589. She says, through spiritualism, Satan appears as a benefactor of the race, healing the diseases of the people and professing to present a new and more exalted system of religious faith. You see that? But at the same time, he works as a destroyer, end of quote. So look, she said it here. Let me read it over. True spiritualism, because it's true spiritualism miracles, the whole population of the earth will be deceived. Remember, the contra-human in them don't have a hold upon people's psychological mindset by controlling the leaders of governments. But here we are shown how the Pharisee thinks. They think that somebody is of God because of miracles.